Hello and welcome everybody. We will be recording today's session and we'll send out a link with our slides and presentation after the webinar. Comments and questions for other attendees can be put in the chat window, but please put any questions for our panelists in the Q&A. That will help us find our questions easily after the session. We'll have some time post our presentation. All right. Before we get started, this webinar is funded by San Diego Learn program, a workforce and education training program that's partnered with MBI to offer free energy efficiency and electrification webinars. You can learn more at sandiegogoloearn.com. Okay, so thank you for joining us for this webinar on building electric efficient tiny homes, smarter, smaller, and more sustainable. We have a great set of panelists today who will bring a great perspective on the requirements of tiny homes, how to build and design them, what you can do as a potential buyer of a tiny home to push the boundaries even further. So let's introduce our great set of panelists. Our first speaker will be Lindsay Woods, aka the Tiny Homes Lady. She's on a mission to help 100,000 families unlock housing solutions as ADUs, primary homes, and movable tiny homes. Lindsay is the creator of the online course Go Tiny Academy. We will then hear from Drew Whitmer, designer and builder of tiny homes through his company Jco. He has created award-winning tiny homes, custom builds, and sustainable projects. Drew brings firsthand insight into designing spaces that are highly efficient, energy efficient, and stylish. And closing us out will be Stacey Murphy-Oglads. She is a tiny home dweller and DIYer designer who is a visionary of mystic design. And I don't have a lovely screenshot up there because I'm not the focus of this great presentation today. But hi, I'm Grant Shealy, a technical associate on the codes and policy team here at New Buildings Institute. I'm excited for today's presentation. I love tiny homes. I even worked at a tiny home factory in New Zealand, helping out with framing for a few months. So it's a topic very close to my heart. So without further ado, I shall pass it to Lindsay to learn more about the 4 types of tiny homes. Lindsay, you can take over the
All right,
screen.
thank you so much, Grant. Great job. I want to know more about that New Zealand thing you did. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Set it to present. Curious to know in the chat, where are people coming from while I give my presentation? It's always great to know what the interest is in tiny homes from our attendees. So I start this presentation off. I get the wonderful honor to do that with the 4 types of tiny homes. And really, it's the 4 types of building standards, but to make it snazzy and simple to remember, it's the 4 types. I have delivered this message to well over 1,000 people in my VIP training, on stages at events like Tiny Fest, Colorado shows, you name it. So really excited to be here to be sharing that information. First of all, grateful. We're always grateful. Grateful for all the organization that's happened behind the scenes, for Stacy that connected me, Shannon that's been doing the work, Grant, Andrew, all the panelists here today. Gratitude, we got to start with that first. And grateful for my buddy Jay Schaefer, that was really the instigator. Tiny homes are not new. Cabins, summer cabins, you name it. But they are having a revival, right? Back in early 2000s, that's when I came into the scene by learning about them from my buddy Jay Schaefer. So housing crisis is what it is, right? I don't know where you live in the world. That's why it'd be great to see it in the chat. The rising prices of homes, the flattening out of living wages, and the size of homes have all resulted in a crisis that can result in, you can see it if there's people that are unhoused. Where you don't see it mostly, though, are people that are paying, families that are paying 30 to 50% over their income, on their housing. And when you pay that much, where do you have room for medical, vacations, families that need to send kids to college, all the other aspects that we want to tap into for life? It just becomes more of a constraint. And so we are seeing a big change in needing for tiny homes. And so what I really like to focus on are the 3 pillars of going tiny: the land, the build, and the fund. And wherever you enter this conversation, right, it may very well be from the build, right? We see them on YouTube, we tap into them. Drew, I actually met Drew in Colorado. Love his designs. I'm so glad he's here because he knows so much about both the tiny home building as well as energy efficiency. So he is going to definitely be giving you more of that. For those that are really here for understanding more of the energy efficiency, I'm giving the bigger open view. Number one, the land dictates the plan. What I have seen in my years, about 6 years now, consulting and guiding people, after my husband and I went tiny, we did drive around the country 7,500 miles with our tiny home and with solar. So we were off grid for 7,500 miles. But after that, became a consultant, helping guide other people. It always became, where do we put it? Well, for us, we were driving around the country. We didn't need land to place for permanent. We were sort of like a unicorn, right? Most people land, you'll be hearing from Stacy, one of my dear clients, who actually landed her home in a park, a beautiful park. So most people do land their home on land, but where do you put it? What happens? What type of zoning? All that kind of thing. What I'm about to talk about and all the types that we're going to share are built in a factory, arrive on wheels, but not all stay on the wheels, right? These are the tools, the factory, the truck, the forklift, and many times the crane, because our homes, our regular primary homes, were not built with the ability to have trucks going down the middle of them, right? We've got the 5 foot setback fence line, and then the next neighbor's 5 foot setback, and then their home. So we really use these type of tools to get these homes to where they need to be. So number one type, NFPA 1192. That's a recreational vehicle. We all familiar with the fifth wheel RV. Well, this home right here is certified to the NFPA 1192. It meets 8.5 width or less, 13.5 height or less. It's 320 square feet or less. That's the ground floor. I was just actually in this home in Las Vegas. They have 2 lofts in them. So with lofts, it's 350 square feet, but that does not count towards this type of certification standard. Okay. The electrical is 50 amp or less, and it's known for temporary living. That's the part that most people get stuck on. Like, wait, I could put an RV or a tiny home at my property, but I can't live in it. But that's what people want to do. So what do you do with, what do you do then? Right? And when I say they can't live with it, it's the law of the land. That's the zoning. Don't have time to unpack that here today, but we're really just focusing on the standards because the standards have to connect to the land, back to that 3 pillars. The land dictates the plan. That's the zoning. So if it's temporary living, now you've got to find somewhere where it's going to allow you to live in that full time. So then the next one, number two, ANSI A119.5, the American National Standards Institute. That's what that stands for. And this is more your RV park model. Most people don't go around talking about these acronyms, but they do know RV park model because they've been around for decades upon decades. Notice right here, there's more of an RV. This is a park model. This one's going to hook up with a trailer. That one's not hooking up anytime soon. But this has been the evolution of the park model. Thicker walls, much better materials, because these in early, I would say like World War II era, it's evolved from there. And now we get to be bigger. Now we get the width of 10 feet more. When you're not traveling around much, you want that bigger width. Height 13.6 or more, go up to maybe 14, even 15. I've heard of some. I kind of cringe because I couldn't imagine driving that around the country, but they don't drive around the country, but they do have to be delivered there. Up to 400 square feet, decks and lofts not included. They can go 50 amps or more. The reason why, you've got different type of, let's say you wanted to do a bigger dryer, like a full-size dryer. Well, that's going to take a different plug. And it's also temporary living. The nice little thing is no property taxes unless you secure it to a foundation and you deed it as real estate. That has been happening. Just to go back a little bit, I've got this light bulb here. Light bulb moment. Tiny homes use less energy than regular size homes. And so a lot of people are like, well, what's a tiny home? I call a tiny home 1,200 square feet or less because there's a lot of the market that can put them in the backyards as accessory dwelling units or in a park, right? But in a park, you're not going to do probably an 800 square feet. You're going to be adhering to more of the RV park model or the NFPA. but in 21 cities and states have adopted this. They're allowing you to put an ADU as built to an NFPA or an ANSI, RV park model, or a regular RV. So the beautiful thing is you can reduce your energy footprint just by going smaller. Number 3, this is the big one. IRC residential code, right? International residential code is what most of our stick-built buildings, as pictured here, are built to. But in this scenario, this home was built in a factory and arrived on wheels, a big giant semi-truck, and now transported in by crane. This is where this was never built with a trailer. So just so everyone knows, if you were building to this or an FPA and you ask the question, what if I take off the wheels? The question to everyone here, and I'll let you answer in the chat, does that change the building standard? Let's say you built it to the ANSI and you took off the wheels. Does it change the building standard? Okay, I'll go back to the chat in a moment just to make sure. I want to see a yes or a no in there. What's your guess? The IRC built in a factory, arriving on wheels, placed on foundation is also known as modular, prefab, factory built. The important thing, yes, all three, not to drive us crazy at all with how many different names there can be, but it's built to the state residential code, known as permanent placement, also known as real estate, and property taxes are assessed. Usually it's a new accessory dwelling unit. In the case like in Mendocino County where I live, you can have one of these movable tiny homes as a primary and also as an ADU. So you really have to check with your local zoning. That's going to be the blank statement that anyone would provide, to the answer of or to the question of where can I put it? What can I do on my property? If you have property. If you're looking for a property, you also need to look to see what's allowed. Okay, and the final one is HUD. Housing Urban Development was actually created, back in the, I think, 50s. But in 1976, mobile home became manufactured home after 76. So this looks like a pre-76. This would be called a mobile home. Now this would be a manufactured home down below. Very much looking like a regular international residential code, but it's built to the HUD code. Definitely different rules, different certifications on that factory and all that. Placed on permanent foundation known as real estate, but it can keep the wheels. It's put up on blocks. In this scenario, they even can do this thing called a pit set where they could dig down in the ground and set that home lower than up on the wheels. Property taxes are assessed with a new ADU. So this is more of what I wanted to share. This is a summary. There's the RV, both NFPA and ANSI, state IRC, national is HUD, and here's the nice little, summary, movable tiny homes. So really you could think of it as 3. These are very slight and differential, but these 3 and these light bulb moments come back to smaller space creates less energy demand, straight up. How you build it, what kind of wall insulation is going to really depend on how that home's going to be handling in the Las Vegas sun in summer or in the cold winter in South Dakota. So I want to turn this back over to Grant. Actually, one more thing. For anyone that wants to find me, thetinyhomelady.com.
Great, thank you. Drew, next up.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yep, we got you.
And we're still good. I'm sorry about that.
All good.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Drew Whitmer. My company is J. Clay Co. And this is a.
Oh, Drew, sorry.
Yes,
You're
sir.
not seeing your slides just yet.
What's going on? We just did this.
No worries, no worries.
All right, everybody. Let's see. So I'm going to click on this. Okay, I'm going to hit share screen, start broadcast. That's what it was.
Nice.
All right. Now this. Boom.
Perfect.
Let me know we're good when it's up.
We're good, Drew. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Well, good morning. My name is Drew Whitmer. I'm a designer and a builder. My company is J. Clay Co. And my company has a focus on sustainable design. I work on residential and commercial. And then I also build a lot of tiny houses. So we're going to talk about some of the things I've learned in my different projects. So first we'll talk about the most common type of residential I work on. The first slide there over on the left is what's called a SIPS panel home. That stands for Structural Insulated Panel Systems. I think it's a great option for tiny houses and ADUs. Basically, you send your plans to the manufacturer and they give you engineered panels back that are prefab with all your framing, all your sheeting, and all your insulation. So we built that house, framed it, insulated, and sheeted in 11 days, which is insane. And it has a really high R value. Most people have seen bat insulation. That's the pink stuff right there. That's totally fine to use in your projects. Some downsides with tiny houses and other projects is it can get some air gaps in there that you see. Anytime you have an air gap, you are not sealed. So it's not as good as the modern foam methods. And the lower mountain house is one I did in Steamboat Springs. A little picture of a guy there showing the framing, and he's about to apply the spray foam insulation. This is pretty much the standard in building right now. It's great for R values and air sealing, so lower energy bills. If you're really thinking of sustainability, it has some drawbacks. A lot of the polymers are made out of plastics. It'll take 500 to 1,000 years to break down into microplastics. But if we're going for just pure keeping you warm, that's the best option right now. Along with that, there's polyiso foam, which is 4 foot by 8 foot sheets that you can get in different thicknesses. And I'll show you, I use those on my tiny house projects sometimes. So here's a few of the builds that I've done for clients. The first two on the top were for the TV show Tiny House Nation. Maybe you've seen those before. I specifically designed those for the clients. And they were traditionally framed, so stick framed and then spray foamed, as well as that sheep herder's wagon on the end. That was a sewing room that I built for a client. She absolutely loves it. Down below, I've shown a couple different options for tiny houses. These are more the off-grid, boondocking type. You can get them certified with the RV certification, but really clients just build, a lot of times just build these and there's no governing body going to come bust you for it. But we always build to the highest standards. So in the bus, this one I chose a hybrid insulation system. We have polyiso foam, 2 inches, and then I use this Reflectix foil material also on the inside of that to reflect a lot of the UV heat that the bus will get. And I went with this method. The system is really good. I'll show you some more examples, but mostly because the bus already had some foam insulation in it when it was a charter bus. Then the bus on the right was for a friend of mine. He had the inside spray foam before I got it and had the cedar in there. And then you can see the beautiful reclaimed wood interior I did on top of that. And thinking about your materials as energy, you run into the store to pick it up, or the material has to be manufactured again if you're buying new. So if you're using reclaimed stuff, you might be saving your energy and kind of energy on the global scale. So I always like repurposing and reusing materials. The long view, maybe you've seen this one. It's a 4-time award winner, and it was featured on A&E's Living Smaller. It was my first tiny house that I designed for myself, and I lived in it for about 4 years. I was trying to have a very compact floor plan in this, and I think I just nailed it. It has a loft bed with a closet, living space, kitchen space, and a shower. To date, that's the most comfortable home I've ever lived in. You can see the steel frame system there. I went with that. Trailer Made Trailers, where I got the trailer for the tiny house. They have a way of producing those studs. So I gave them my blueprints and they send it to you as a kit. Almost anyone could put it together with a screw gun. I will mention along that, with every tiny house I do, I glue and screw the exterior sheeting on. That's going to keep your tiny house nice and square traveling down the road. The steel frame saves about 1,000 pounds of weight. The tiny house came out to be 8,800 pounds, which is really light for a tiny house. There's a two-tone design to it. There's white metal on the back, and I'll talk about that more in the next slide. Again, reclaimed materials. You'll see a lot on the inside. And one thing I really wanted to hit here is the hybrid insulation method. You can see in the back on my drop-down deck, that back wall, that is R13 bat insulation. It's what I could afford on this project. And then you'll see the picture right below it, the little pink edge of foam. That's called a thermal break. There's this thing that happens in houses and tiny houses called thermal bridging, where the sun will heat up the house and wick that energy into your house. Or if you're heating your house in the winter, it'll wick the heat out. So if you do a hybrid insulation like this, you can stop a lot of that. And I silicone the sheets together, and I silicone the exterior sheets together as well. So it had a nice airtight seal. This thing heated with the tiniest space heater. Here you can see that two-tone design. Why I like that: one, the metal was reclaimed. I got it off of some brewery cooler panels, also some insulation that I was able to salvage from those. But I like the idea that you can pivot the tiny house if the heat gets too hot in the peak of summer. And that seemed to work amazing. That and the white roof and the shade from the solar panels kept it super cool. You can see I also brought in some passive heating and cooling designs with operable skylights. If you put an operable skylight at the peak of your house and you open a door down below, you're going to get a nice draft and all the heat's going to leave. So this house was super comfortable. I also did 1,200 watts of solar on this tiny house. And it was my first solar panel experience. So I did the whole battery bank, charge controller, all of that. And I found with a minimal appliance package, I have a 4-gallon electric water heater, a mini fridge, 2-burner induction cooktop, and I put it in the wall there, but it's just a regular countertop, air fryer, toaster oven. I had plenty of electricity for everything that I needed. The only thing I couldn't do is heat the house full time. So in the winter, I was plugged in. I love all electric options. I'm not big on filling propane tanks, so I didn't want to go that route. But I'm also a tinkerer, and so I started experimenting with HHO. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's magic. You do water electrolysis. You put some voltage into water, and it splits into the hydrogen and oxygen, and you can see that little image. I made a fireplace. This didn't go to my client who I sold it to. This is just me tinkering around, exploring with ideas. Now, my current tiny house is a 1949 Spartan Manor, 76, 77-year-old trailer. It was totally abandoned and gutted. So I did a full rehab on this. And the architect, Carl Elefante, says, the greenest building is one that's already built. And this kind of falls in line with that. I saved this shell. It's all aluminum. It could be recycled, but hopefully it lasts another 76 years now. And on this one, I did a mineral wool insulation. That is a form of bat. And I chose that because I researched and they said spray foam on these trailers can vibrate and fall off. eventually, or put little air gaps in it, so you're not getting the seal anymore. So I went with the original kind of mineral wool that these had. And then the floor, I did a hybrid system. Trailer frames get really cold if you live in a cold climate. So I put 2 inches of isofoam underneath the trailer, and then I put in mineral wool, and then on top of that, more of that Reflectix foil that reflects radiant heat. And I coiled in the red radiant piping there, and I don't have it connected yet. Hopefully this winter I'll be running this system. But should be a very efficient way to heat the tiny house where you're cycling hot water glycol through there. Also on this house has 2,000 watts of solar panels, and they're called bifacial solar panels. That they don't have a back on them, so they get about 30% more energy from reflected sunlight, which is really awesome. Along with those solar panels, I now have switched to doing an all-in-one power bank. You can get these pretty inexpensively and link them together. They're great because you don't have to do any of the wiring. You don't have to worry about a cable getting loose and potentially arcing, causing a fire. This one I upgraded to a 6-gallon electric water heater. They're great. They heat up in about 20 minutes, taking about 1,600 watts. And then you can shut them off if you're trying to conserve your batteries. It also has 2 50-gallon water tanks, and those are in the floor. I'm experimenting with using those as thermal mass. Heat that water up inside the tank during the winter, and that'll be part of the flooring system to keep the house warm. Also has the option for a diesel heater. That's a unit I moved between a couple different projects. They're really great. They sip diesel. They put out very little fumes. They have an exhaust pipe you kick out of your project. And they also make a diesel water heater. So that might be part of the floor system. Also, evacuated tube is a type of solar collector that's super energy efficient. I may add some of those to the system on the roof. And I love the kind of off-grid DIY ideas like the rocket stove that you can coil a pipe on and plug that into your system to change that heat into energy into the water. Blade camper. I had to buy a big diesel truck to pull all these tiny houses and go to my different jobs. And so I wanted to build the ultimate rig. Sometimes I can't take the tiny house to my job site. I travel a lot for work, work in the mountains and such. And so I built this camper. It's a concept to go on any flatbed truck. And what I really like is that it's disaster ready. Like if there's a crisis, I could jump in my area and start helping people. You know, I got the battery powered chainsaws in there, the power bank. It has a water pump I plug in so we can take showers. And I just did a 5 national park tour in this thing, which was amazing. Just showing you some of the inspiration photos. Who doesn't love the Batmobile tumbler? That thing's cool. My design, where it started in 2018, just fabbing it in the yard. And then the image on the right shows the hybrid insulation. It's only 1 inch thick, pretty much, 1.25 inches. And the 2 layers of the isofoam and the Reflectix just reflect the majority of the heat from the thing and keep the cold inside as well. You can see all the expandable drawers there for my tools and how it opens up. It's a really fun project. All right, now sustainable options. If you're going to be building on a foundation like an ADU, these are some of my favorite options. We got to go back to the past for the good stuff. So there we have the adobe and the stepped pyramid, just mud brick. No one's taking care of that, and it's still standing. There's a house there in the center that was built in 1818. It's in Los Angeles. I think it's called a Villa Adobe. And then showing the potential of Adobe on the right. You can do amazing homes. And these houses are fireproof, pest resistant, super well insulated, get rid of EMFs. They have a ton of potential. So I can't wait to build one of these houses. And then along with that is rammed earth. And it's essentially the same, except you're mixing in clay and sand and maybe a little lime to stabilize it, and you compact it with sledgehammers or pneumatic hammers, and that will essentially turn it into sandstone. I want to do a house as kind of a hybrid with this as a feature wall. I think that would be really beautiful. A couple other options right there in California, an architect created CalEarth.org, sandbag architecture, and then you stucco it. Has all the same benefits of Adobe, but anyone can build this method pretty much from excavating your site. And these are all allowable by the 2018 IRC codebook. So you just got to find those codes, have an engineer work with you, and you will be set to build sustainable. And another one of my favorites is hempcrete. This product, you grow a field of hemp after you've sent it out for processing. You get some shake left over. You mix that with lime, water. You end up with a really fire resistant, high R value. It traps carbon that was in the plant. And it's just incredible. You can see some of the designs there. And there are a few companies offering prefab hemp domes that you could install yourself. Now, vision for the future, what I'm seeing, neighborhoods getting smarter as we, remodel houses, maybe rebuild after a fire. Let's bring these principles of harvesting your own energy, having power backup, water backup. And then I really want gardens, home gardens to take off. There could be food shortages anytime if we had a disruption. And I think garden and energy are like your best bet to have in your backyard. In the center there, there's a few concepts that I've done for maybe infill, turning one house into maybe 4 tiny houses with a greenhouse, permaculture principles in the yard, so you have an edible landscape. Slide below that of the quad home is something I did for after the Haiti earthquake, was my vision for rebuilding the slums. Kind of same thing, start growing hemp, and then you can build out of the hemp. And I called it an emergency agrarian economy because people need to eat. And then finally, I like having a tiny house in the backyard, always for power backup if it has solar on it. They're a great asset. If your grid goes down and your fridge is out of power, you can just run a cord to your refrigerator, or maybe some lighting. But I'd like to make them multi-use spaces where they're greenhouses, offices, maybe mix in a spa and a sauna. So I'm working on some of those concepts now. And finally, my vision, I'm working on I'm going to start with maybe a retirement community, and then maybe one for young professionals. But basically all these principles into one, holistic design tiny houses. And they come with some great concepts like, okay, we could all share the burden of gardening together and producing. We could also, why do we all have to have a car and a truck? What if we checked them out like it was a library? And same with tools and all sorts of that stuff. So maybe if we combine forces like they did in the olden times, we would be a lot more powerful and we wouldn't be struggling as much. Anyway, thank you so much for letting me present this. My name is Drew Whitmer and J. Clay Co. If I can help you in any way, feel free to reach out. I'll give you guidance along the way. And would love to help you. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Drew. Next up, we'll have Stacy.
Hello, everyone. All right, so I'm going to pull up mine now. Okay. Here we go. All right, here we go, everybody. So I wanted to thank everyone. I'm Stacy Murphy O'Galdes. And, Lindsay and Drew really set this up really well. So I'm really going to take everybody home, because what I'm going to be focusing on is the expansion of the attainability of this housing and why it's important for our industry, and then really get into the details of the sustainability aspect of the build. So I'm going to be sharing the future of how this is important to the future of your business. And I'm going to be focusing more specifically on retrofits, right? And so this is how you can actually make the homes more sustainable and really giving you an electrification reality checklist of what's going on. So just a little bit about me so you can actually see how I fit into this whole space. So I am a manifestation and life design coach, but just like Grant said in the beginning, I'm a tiny home dweller, a DIYer, and a designer. And so that actually is my tiny mansion that I currently live in. So when Lindsay was talking about the 4 different types of tinies, I actually live in a park model, all right? And my home was featured in several different media outlets, including the Business Insider. And I'm also the Tiny Life subject matter expert for San Diego Learn, who is actually sponsoring this. So really appreciate the work that they're doing. So let's kind of just hop into why this matters for the industry. And the first thing is something that is hot off the press. And that is just this year in May, there was a bipartisan legislation that was submitted called HR 3475. And that actually is the Homeowners Opportunity Act. And what happens is it's a benefit for both builders as well as for home buyers. So this is really to address the housing affordability crisis. And what happens is for builders, so for those of you on this call who are builders, there are going to be multiple tax credits that are going to be available for constructing homes that are under 1,200 square feet, because that is what the United States considers a tiny home, anything underneath 1,200 square feet. And for home buyers, it's going to be focused specifically on manufactured homes, single wides only until there's going to be park models like myself, as well as ADUs. Just like Lindsay said, accessory dwelling units is what it's really going to be for. And it is targeting primarily first-time home buyers. And this is specifically to deal with the housing affordability crisis. Now let's look and see the picture, or should I say, how ADUs are going to play in this. Now, I'm going to be focusing on California because, I'm based here in San Diego. And so this will give you a snapshot of what is going to expand nationally as to why it's something that we need to put a pulse on. Because in the past 3 years, about a quarter of all the new homes within the state of California were permitted for ADUs. And in San Diego specifically, this can be shocking, but there were more ADUs that were built than single family homes in San Diego County in 23. And Southern California literally is actually leading this charge. So if you really kind of think about this, this is what the trend is looking like right now, even before that legislation. So let's just think positively with that legislation going through, right? Right now, it's still at introduction stage. I've been following what's going on there. Now, when that goes through, it's going to take this number and take it to a whole new level, why it's there. So with that being said, I really want to focus on some retrofits. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of retrofits. I'm going to give you kind of like the main things to look out for. And at the end, I'm going to actually share some ways about if you want to go a little bit deeper and learn a little bit more about this, I'll be able to get into that. So here's one to start out. Let's kind of give it a little bit of a reality check, all right? And this is actually a real life situation that I'm going through right now, which is your appliances are going to be fighting for power. The current situation I'm dealing with right now, it's like one of my GFCI switches in my kitchen blew out after I plugged in an infrared portable cooktop, right? And the reason why that goes on, and this is a issue for tiny ADUs or small home design, it's an amp issue. That is the main reason why you have to do this tug of war and battle with the appliances. So here is a real world situation that currently many tiny owners have to deal with. So what is contributing to that amp issue? Well, the biggest thing is the problem is some of the older parks. Now, I live in a tiny home community, and because I wanted to be legally parked, okay? There are, a lot of people that have tinies and they have them parked under the radar, but I'm talking about, and we're all talking about the legal stuff here. And yes, my home is ANSI, has the ANSI certification for my particular home. And so the older parks where a lot of these homes currently reside, and there's going to be more that will probably eventually come up the pike, they're currently maxed out at 50 amps. And so that creates an issue for going 100% fully electric. right? And what I'm talking about are homes where Drew talked about building homes from beginning to end. What I did with my build was a hybrid approach where I worked with a national park model builder. So when that legislation goes through, there's going to be a lot of demand in that area. So I worked with one of the top national builders. And what happens is they can crank out the homes, but they are not electrification experts. So that is where to get the home to be more sustainable, especially if you're in California, to deal with the initiative that California has, you have to solve this problem. So one of the ways in which it's done is my builder, knowing originally I wanted to be 100 amps, had sent the conversion wiring so that I can eventually upgrade my house if I move it in a different area. Now, where I'm currently parked, I can't use that wiring right now. So the second solution is a portable solar system. And there are two different types of portable solars you can have, which I will address momentarily because it depends on some other factors which determine that. So right now, I'm actually going to go through in order of priority. What are those appliances that would need to be retrofitted within a home? So the first one I'm looking at here is your heating and your cooling. And so that's going to look at mini splits. I have a PTAC unit in mind. These are all ductless, as well as heat pumps. Now, depending on which of these heating and cooling systems that you want to use, other factors play into that, primarily your windows, right? Um, NBI was hosting another webinar around heat pumps. It was amazing. I was loving it. And then there was one I was like, oh, that's great. I didn't have the right windows in my house in order to use that heat pump. So that's actually going to determine when you're retrofitting which of these units a buyer ends up using. The next thing is, and like I said, this is going in order of priority, it's the cooktop in the cooking systems. The reason why a lot of the appliances in these types of homes are gas, and in California, they're wanting to phase out gas. So people are already talking about those plans of converting those appliances to electric. So the next thing would be the cooktop. So as many people know, a 4-burner induction cooktop requires somewhere between 40 to 50 amps. Well, that's the entire amp load for that house. So in some houses, they may just do a 2-burner induction cooktop, but for mine, I actually need 4. So that's going to be one of the important items that will need to be retrofitted. The next one is your water tank. All right. More tinies in these smaller units are going to on-demand water tanks for obvious reasons: space, conservation, things of that nature. So that would be another item that would have to be converted and retrofitted from gas over to electric. Knowing that retrofitting these appliances isn't necessarily the cheapest thing that's out there. So some of the owners, depending on where you come into the process of the build, will actually have to do an order of priority of which appliances they will want to switch over. And so that is my particular case where I'm going to be focusing on my heating and cooling first, then followed by the induction cooktop. The next retrofit essential is going to be the washer and dryer units. Now, it seems like the combo units are making a comeback. You see Samsung advertising them all the time. They were a big thing in the tiny space. However, more are actually moving over to the stackable units because of the time it takes for those combo units to complete a load. So when you are retrofitting the stackable units, it has to be a unit that has 2 separate. It can't be an all-in-one like an LG tower, because it's only the dryer that's with gas, because the washer stays electric. Now, the next item is going to be your dishwasher that will need to be converted over. But then even more importantly, after that is solar prep. Now, with the solar prep, it really depends on where you come into the process. If you come into the process as it's being built, it can be prepped in one particular way. But then there's the other second solar prep when the house is fully complete, like how my house is fully complete. And so what happens is there would have to be a solar system that would complement what I already have. And that is contingent on 2 specific things. The first thing is, how is your community powered? And so that is what's powering my tiny community. We do have a community solar farm that is net metered and tied into with SDG&E, which is our utility company down here in San Diego. So since my community is run on a solar farm, in terms of for me to get solar for my tiny house, it would have to be off-grid portable solar is what I would need to do. And so because of that, my home will actually have two electrical panels. It'll have the standard panel, but then it's going to have, it will require a second portable solar grid panel so that they would know which of the appliances I want to then switch over to the portable solar. And so those are like really big top line on those electrification with the retrofitting to make these homes more sustainable. Now, to really kind of close out things and kind of wrap it up with a little bit of a bow, from an affordability standpoint, what's going to be really important to this audience in this group is the new legislation that's being proposed. So if we look at it right now, these types of houses within California, because that's what I'm specifically talking about here, already account for almost a quarter of the permits and what's going on. So once that legislation goes through to deal with the affordability issue, to also deal with environmental issues as well, that number is significantly going to increase. And I will tell you this, being in the tiny space and owning these homes, there are certain contractors that will not touch these houses because they're a manufactured house or for whatever reason. So here is where you will be able to carve a space because this industry is going to grow. Now, from a sustainability standpoint, really this is going to be helping with climate change initiatives and climate change solutions, which are only going to accelerate over time. So right here and today with this webinar, we just gave you a real top line view from beginning to end on those bolts. So here with San Diego Learn, we have like some micro learning. They're like on demand 15 minutes where you can go a little bit deeper on some of these topics. So Tiny Part 1 is available with the Tiny Carbon Footprint. You can grab that QR code that's there. And then we also have Tiny Part 2, which is about sustainable design and construction as it applies to tiny, small home and ADU design. So you can go ahead and grab those so you can start to get a little bit more deep dive into specific subject matters. Now, like I said in the beginning, if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can join me actually in November, where I'm actually going to be doing a much bigger, deeper dive, a live webinar around retrofitting your tiny and small home design. And so it's going to get more an exhaustive list of your checklist of what to retrofit. We're also going to get a little bit more into the hybrid approach, because those are the two ways in which to electrify the home. And you're going to have two different approaches there. And then the final, we're going to touch a little bit into zoning, just like how Lindsay touched on it a little bit. I'm going to touch on it a little bit there as well, because it's very important in terms of what it is that you build and where you build. So with that, if you want to even tour my tiny house, you can go to my website right there where you can see the full tour of my home. And if you have any questions for me around the tiny process, around the realities of tiny life, and the adjustments that you have to also do for the electrification, you can go ahead and email me there. And I hope that you join me in November for a deeper dive into retrofit your tiny. And with that, I will actually transfer it over back to Grant.
Thank you so much. All right, let's go back. Amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much for our presenters. We got some questions in the Q&A that have been partially answered in the chat, but let's go through them here just so we have good clarity. So one of the questions was about insulation types, which Drew mentioned a bunch of. There's a question about natural wool insulation. Is there a good choice for tiny home retrofits, and are there any downsides you see there, Drew?
Yeah, kind of the same as bat. That's in the classification as bat. It's kind of a cool product. They make it from slag, which is left over from the steel smelting process, so it's kind of sustainable. But yeah, it kind of has the same problems that it can shake in your wall and you end up with gaps. So the trick to bad insulation is you want to make sure it's very tight in your cavity. And you also want to make sure that you don't overstuff it. It needs to stay fluffy. If you compact it in there, it's going to kill the R value, which is how they rate insulation. It's around the same cost as bat, maybe a little bit more expensive. And that's all a bit cheaper than spray foam. So
That's great. Thank you. You're absolutely right. You do want the insulation to be nice and fluffy and have no gaps there. And then what about for are there any places that specialize in smaller, low wattage, tiny home type appliances? I think that we've heard a lot about fitting this all into your panel, and obviously there's some great ideas in general around designing with that intent in mind. But are there any places you go to for appliances specifically?
So there are plenty of RV and tiny houses appliance manufactured, and a lot of times you'll see there's a premium cost on those, but there's probably plenty of affordable ones. If you look back through my slides, you can see what I pretty much use in every one of my projects. My houses are built for me and maybe one other person, so there's not a ton of demand for like needing a ton of burners. So I like just getting, a cheap dorm fridge that costs $200. They're super energy efficient. They have freezers. I always use a 2 burner or larger induction cooktop. You can get those pretty inexpensive as well. And you can modify them so that they look more built in. I did that with the toaster oven in the long view. I had a closet where I could fit it in there. And it works great, an air fryer toaster, and I can fit a whole chicken with potatoes under it and everything in it. So that's my recommendation. You can get your appliances for like $700-800 if you go that route.
And I'd like to add on, I just went online, typed in 12-volt appliances and got one of the companies I shared in the chat. I don't know them. Super important to know there's the whole RV world. There's been the off-grid living and portable mobile living for a long time. So as someone that owned a tiny home and also an RV, yeah, there's that one, Shannon. That was just one of many. You can also use chat to find like all the different companies.
Yeah.
You kind of also want to find out what are the reviews. That's why I made sure full disclaimer, I don't know, I've never bought from them. But do know that like in an RV, we were able to run on shore power, propane, and also solar. So that fridge cost us $3,000 to get inside that darn camper, most expensive I've ever spent because it could do all those things. Yeah.
Along with that, you mentioned the off-grid stuff. My latest purchase, it's on the second slide of the Blade camper. It's essentially a cooler that you plug in that to a 12-volt like cigarette lighter in your truck. And so I used that on my latest trip, and that thing did awesome. You can get it down to freezing temperatures. Has a lot of capability. So I could fit about a week's worth of food in there for 2 people, and that only cost $200. So.
Oh, another one. There's a big movement of everyone like living in, my friend lives in her element. And so they use those really heavy duty, what is it, the coolers that are like really thick insulation.
Yeah.
You also can look to the solar appliance world too. Anyone that runs their home off of solar, and so all that 12-volt world, the thicker the insulation, especially for refrigeration, the better you're going to keep that cooling.
Great. Thank you for the insight there. Love having these experts on the line here with us. Um, are there any efforts, this is for any of our participants, is there any, or any of our panelists, sorry, are there any efforts to retrofit garages and make them into tiny homes? Have you seen this approach happening? Lindsay
Yep.
seems to be nodding. Okay.
Yes, so if something's attached to your home, that's your junior ADU typically. I mean, there's many states that haven't even passed the ADU law, so they probably haven't even passed the junior ADU law. Here in California, it's alive and well. Again, with the chat GPT, I would definitely do some research there, talk to your own local planning department. Garage, master bedroom. I'm currently right now sitting in a junior ADU that was once formerly an addition, right, to a home that has a 1 bedroom, a family room, bathroom, and then brilliant, my in-laws, they put in water and sewer for future thinking that we could add a kitchen. And when I found that out, we went immediately to do that because now we're supporting my father-in-law aging in place. So yeah, you
Oh,
definitely want to look to your local jurisdiction for, do you allow me to convert something in my home, garage, master bedroom, you name it. But know that that's different and the sizing is different. Usually it's about 500 square feet or whatever the garage size is, not so much the 1,200 square feet like the the ADU would be.
And this is
great.
where the new legislation that they're proposing would also come in, right? And so right now it's done by state, where what are the ADU laws here, and then even by state it's different, okay? So with the new legislation, it's actually going to put a level playing field across the entire United States. So it's going to take it from a hodgepodge of different things and nationalize it across the board. They are looking at changing the designation around some of the manufactured homes to because of zoning issues that are going on around the place. So these are all of the things that are kind of baked in. So when I do the retrofit your tiny, I'm going to go a little bit more into that. But yes, to piggyback off of the question and what Lindsay said, yes, all of these structures that now are not considered plausible, quote unquote, housing are now going to be added into the real estate landscape of what's going on. What's going on there?
Just to follow up, Stacy's right. We have done being part of the Tiny Home Industry Association. City by city, jurisdiction by jurisdiction is tiring. It took me 2 years to support Mendocino County to approve something. Once you do that, multiple cities and jurisdictions, and then there's states that have allowed ADUs, we got to get things at the more national level. So thank you, Stacy, for being the educator. Follow this lady. Put your information, Stacy, again on where they can find you if the slides aren't there, because that can really help for a lot of people. I noticed a lot of people were from all over the country here, not just in California, where, yes, there's a lot of momentum here because we've had the housing crisis so many more decades than most states.
Yeah.
Great insight. A really good common solution for electrification on small panels has often been circuit splitters. Do you guys see circuit splitters being used in tiny homes? Maybe Drew?
One thing I've looked into is what they call soft start. They're on air conditioning units a lot of times, but it's essentially a capacitor that if you flick on a motor with a high load, it'll give you a little bit of stored energy when you start a motor in a tiny house, or actually anywhere. The energy draw is most high in the beginning, so those help. I have had inverters that you can plug into the grid that will charge your battery, and as well as if your batteries are depleted, will automatically switch over to running on grid power. So I've used systems like that.
That's great. And then I think we have time for maybe one more. And before I do that, I was reminded that Shannon has dropped a link in the chat for filling out some feedback for today's webinar. That'd be greatly appreciated. And really big shout out to Shannon. She's done so much to organize this webinar. So big shout out to Shannon. But the last question we have maybe time for is, what do you think the largest barrier from tiny home communities is? Why aren't we seeing more of them across the country? They seem like such a great idea.
You ladies.
I think we each can take a
Yeah.
on that. Each of us give like a little bit of a snippet. One of the biggest things is education, zoning. That is one of the in my instance, one of the biggest barriers. The other thing is because of having legal tiny home communities, they are not building these types of communities. They haven't built these types of communities, which were RV parks, manufactured home parks, things of that nature. A lot of them are older because of zoning issues that have restricted these buildings. So that literally is like the biggest conundrum why if you want to learn more and be on top of that, you want to go to THEA, which is the Tiny House Industry Association. They're the ones that really are keeping a pulse from a zoning perspective of what's going on here in the United States. You can click on your state And then I believe, Lindsay, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one. You can, after you click on your state, you can then click on your county to then see what is the zoning information and the zoning regulations that are in your county. So
No, not that detailed.
oh, not that detailed yet? Okay. So that's why I wanted to tell me if you correct me on that one. So, and from my world, it's the zoning is the biggest, one of the biggest drawbacks for it. So hopefully with the ordinance that will, or the legislation that they introduced, that will move this forward to make it much easier.
And that legislation is at the national level, correct?
Yes,
Not state
yes.
level. See, that's super
National.
important, you guys. It could be something at the state level, but when you do national, that helps you. We have never seen in our history of housing any type of, I mean, of course, sorry, I take that back. HUD is a national standard. IRC is state by state by state, but guess what? Every state in the nation adopts IRC except for Wisconsin, but you can't call it a national standard. Then you got the RV code, the ANSI, and the NFPA are also national codes. So we have a national standard system, but we do not have national zoning. Oh my goodness, no. Where I sit right now, city of Palo Alto. One city down is the city of Mountain View. Everyone's different. And then they have all their different zoning types. So Stacy is 100% right. We have got a big zoning issue, and zoning goes way, 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 way back to the very first time there was ever an R1 zoning place. Guess what city it was in? Berkeley. There was a dance hall that wanted to be built. It was going to be built by Black people, and white people came along and said no. And they created the R1 zoning. That's history, people. I didn't make that up. And we redlining, all those things are what we have to seriously dismantle. We still have that called redlining turned to zoning. When, you know, obviously all the we are welcoming everyone. Well, did we really? No, we didn't. We still have old thinking that applies to now that we've got to dismantle. And that is where tiny homes are a big disruptor, because we're dealing with families that want to house other family members on their property. We're dealing with people that want to be community together. These are very simple things that we can do as humans, but we've got to get it through, you know, legislation.
One other thing I can add to that, as I've worked with clients, one of the biggest drawbacks is funding. A tiny house can easily be $100,000, even for something, you know, pretty modest. The Longview, when I sold that, that was around 76,000. And a lot of people don't have that money saved up, and it can be difficult to get loans for them. But the ladies may have some insight on that. I think they're starting to give out funding for tiny houses. So,
Yeah, thank you so much. That's so great. This was a lovely webinar, and I appreciate all of our panelists' time and appreciate every participant for joining us today. Have a lovely day.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.